Imagine you are sailing in the middle of a vast, endless ocean. The sky is overcast, the stars are hidden, and there is no visible shoreline. The waves move beneath you, but you do not know where you are going. Then suddenly, through a break in the clouds, a single star appears. That star does not carry your boat, it does not calm the waves, and it does not shorten the journey, but it gives you direction. Without it, you drift endlessly. With it, every movement gains meaning. This is what refuge truly is. It is not a crutch for the weak, it is clarity for the lost. And when the ancient words arise, Buddham saranam gacchami, Dhammam saranam gacchami, Sangham saranam gacchami, they are not prayers to be repeated blindly, they are living directions that transform confusion into understanding. To take refuge in the Buddha is to recognize that such a guiding light exists, not somewhere far away, but as a living possibility within consciousness itself. The Buddha is not merely a figure preserved in history, not just a teacher remembered through words and statues. He is the embodiment of what happens when the human mind is completely free from confusion. Just as a mountain peak rises above the clouds, not creating the sky but revealing its vastness, the Buddha does not give you truth. He reveals that truth is already present. When we say, Buddham saranam gacchami, we are not placing ourselves beneath another. We are turning toward clarity, toward awakening, toward the end of inner blindness. Consider a piece of flint resting silently on the ground. To the untrained eye, it is just a stone, ordinary, lifeless. But hidden within it is a spark that can ignite fire. The spark does not come from outside. It is released through the right contact, the right friction. In the same way, awakening is not something added to you, it is something revealed within you. The Buddha stands as the one who discovered how to strike that spark. His life becomes like a set of flint stones handed down through time, not to worship, but to use. When you take refuge in the Buddha, you are saying, this spark is real, and I am willing to discover it within myself. In another way, the Buddha is like someone who has walked through a dense forest and found a hidden clearing. The forest is thick with confusion, paths that circle back, shadows that deceive, sounds that mislead. Most wander endlessly within it. But one who has found the clearing leaves behind subtle markers, not commands, not force, but quiet indications. Walk this way. The map he offers does not carry your feet, it does not remove your uncertainty, but without it, you would remain lost without even knowing that freedom is possible. To take refuge in the Buddha is to trust that such a clearing exists, and that the path toward it has been seen. Yet in the beginning, the mind does not understand this depth. It seeks something concrete, something it can hold on to. This is natural. Just as a child learning to write first traces letters drawn by another hand, the seeker begins by tracing the form of the Buddha, his image, his words, his presence. There is comfort in this, a sense of being guided. Devotion arises not because the seeker is weak, but because the heart intuitively recognizes something true, even before the mind fully understands it. This stage is like holding a lantern in the darkness. You may think the light belongs to the lantern itself, but in truth, the lantern only carries the flame. Over time, a subtle shift begins to happen. One starts to sense that what is being honored is not the form, but the light within the form. The Buddha then is no longer seen as separate. He becomes a reflection, a possibility. The reverence remains, but its direction changes. It moves from outward admiration to inward awakening. Slowly, the seeker begins to loosen their grip. Just as someone learning to ride a bicycle eventually lets go of the supporting hand, there comes a moment when reliance on the outer form begins to dissolve. Not because it is rejected, but because it has fulfilled its purpose. The Buddha is no longer something to cling to, he becomes something to awaken through. His presence shifts from being an object of devotion to being a doorway of realization. In this unfolding, the ego does not shatter violently, it softens gently. It begins to see that its effort to control, to define, to hold on to certainty is the very thing that obscures clarity. Just as mist dissolves when touched by the morning sun, the sense of a fixed I begins to thin out in the presence of understanding. There is no struggle in this process, no forceful rejection. There is simply a quiet recognition. What I am seeking is not outside, and what I am clinging to is not necessary. And so, taking refuge in the Buddha becomes a living experience, not a statement. It is a turning, a shift in direction, from confusion to clarity, from imitation to realization, from dependence to discovery. The Buddha is the beginning, but not the end. He is the first opening in the wall, the first glimpse beyond limitation. And once that glimpse is seen, even faintly, the journey has already begun. As the understanding of refuge deepens, it naturally widens into Sangham Saranam Gacchami. I take refuge in the Sangha. If the Buddha is the one who has awakened, the Sangha is the living field of awakening in motion. It is not a fixed group, not a rigid identity, but a flowing river of seekers, those who have begun to see, those who are learning to see, and even those who are just beginning to question the darkness. To take refuge in the Sangha is to recognize that the journey toward truth is not solitary. It is shared, echoed, and supported through countless lives moving in the same direction. Imagine walking through a long mountain tunnel. Alone, the darkness feels endless, each step uncertain, every sound amplified by fear. But suddenly you hear footsteps, not behind you, not ahead of you, but around you. Others are walking too. You may not see their faces clearly, you may not know their names, but their presence changes everything. The darkness remains, yet it no longer feels isolating. The Sangha is like this unseen companionship. It does not remove the tunnel, but it transforms your experience of walking through it. There is a subtle transmission that happens within the Sangha, something beyond words, beyond teachings. Just as a single candle can light many others without losing its flame, the clarity of one seeker begins to illuminate another. It may happen through a glance, a silence, a shared moment of stillness. Slowly, the mind begins to settle, not because it is forced, but because it is influenced. This is the quiet power of spiritual company. It is not instruction, it is resonance. Yet the Sangha is not always comfortable. In fact, it is often where the deepest layers of ego are revealed. Alone, the ego can hide unnoticed. Among others, it becomes visible, in comparison, in judgment, in subtle resistance. One may feel drawn to some and repelled by others. But this too is part of the refuge. The Sangha becomes like a mirror with many faces, reflecting back the unseen patterns within us. And if one remains open, these reflections become opportunities, not for criticism, but for understanding. To truly take refuge in the Sangha is to move beyond preference. It is to recognize that every being, no matter how confused or clear, carries within them the same hidden flame. Just as different musical notes, when played together, create a harmony beyond any single tone, the diversity within the Sangha creates a field of growth. Some inspire through their clarity, others through their struggle, but all contribute to the unfolding. In this way, respect deepens. It is no longer based on status or progress, but on the shared direction toward truth. And then, the refuge deepens further into Dhammam Saranam Gacchami. I take refuge in the Dhamma. Here, the movement is no longer toward a person or a community, but toward the very nature of reality itself. Dhamma is not something created, not something owned. It is what is. It is the law that governs the rising and falling of all things, the silent order behind chaos, the unseen thread connecting every moment. To take refuge in the Dhamma is to trust existence as it is, rather than as we wish it to be. Imagine standing at the edge of a vast river. You cannot control its flow, you cannot stop its current, yet you can choose how you relate to it. You can struggle against it and exhaust yourself, or you can learn its rhythm and move with it. The Dhamma is like this river. It does not bend to your will, but it invites your understanding. When you align with it, life begins to feel less like a battle and more like a dance. Each moment, whether pleasant or painful, becomes part of a greater unfolding. In this refuge, surrender takes on a new meaning. It is no longer about giving up something. It is about seeing clearly. Just as a person waking from a dream does not need to fight the dream to end it, but simply needs to awaken, The seeker aligned with Dhamma does not struggle to control life, but begins to understand it. There is a quiet intelligence in this surrender, a recognition that the same principle that moves the stars also moves your breath, your thoughts, your existence. And so, the three refuges come to completion. From the Buddha, the awakened one, to the Sangha, the awakening many, to the Dhamma, the truth that is everywhere. It is a movement from form to formlessness, from guidance to understanding, from seeking to being. When these refuges are lived, not just spoken, something profound shifts. The need to grasp begins to fade, the fear of losing begins to soften, and in its place arises a stillness, vast, silent, and free. In that stillness, refuge is no longer something you take, it is something you are. There is no longer a seeker separate from the path, no longer a destination apart from the journey. There is only this unfolding moment, held within the timeless law of Dhamma. And in this realization, the journey finds its quiet completion. Dhammam saranam gacchami. I take refuge in the Dhamma. Here, the journey moves beyond individuals, beyond teachers, beyond communities, into the very fabric of existence itself. Dhamma is not something invented, not something believed, and not something that belongs to any tradition. It is what remains when all ideas fall silent. It is the quiet law that governs all things, the rising and falling of breath, the appearing and disappearing of thoughts, the birth and dissolution of worlds. It is not something you can hold, yet nothing exists outside of it. Dhamma is like the unseen current beneath the surface of the ocean. On the surface, waves rise, crash, and disappear, each wave seeming separate, dramatic, and important. But beneath, there is a vast, steady movement that holds them all. Our lives are like those waves, full of activity, emotion, and change. We identify with each rise and fall, each gain and loss. But to take refuge in the Dhamma is to become aware of the deeper current. It is to recognize that beneath the changing surface, there is an order that is constant, silent, and unshaken. You cannot grasp the Dhamma because it is not an object. It is the very condition that allows all objects to exist. It is like space. Everything appears within it, yet it remains untouched by what appears. A storm may rage, clouds may gather, lightning may strike, but the sky itself is never harmed. In the same way, experiences arise within awareness, joy, sorrow, fear, desire, but the underlying nature remains unchanged. To take refuge in the Dhamma is to shift attention from the storm to the sky, from the passing to the eternal. At first, the mind resists this. It wants control, it wants certainty, it wants to shape life according to its preferences. But the Dhamma does not bend to personal will. It is like gravity. You may ignore it, deny it, even resist it, but it continues to function exactly as it is. When you drop something, it falls. Not because you believe in gravity, but because it is so. In the same way, suffering arises from clinging, peace arises from letting go, not as a belief, but as a law. To take refuge in the Dhamma is to stop arguing with this law and begin to understand it. As this understanding deepens, something subtle begins to shift. The constant inner tension, the need to fix, to change, to control, starts to loosen. Just as a swimmer who stops struggling against the water begins to float effortlessly, the seeker who aligns with the Dhamma begins to move with life rather than against it. There is a sense of trust, not blind trust, but experiential trust. You begin to see that life is not chaotic, not random, but unfolding according to patterns that can be understood and lived in harmony with. At this stage, something profound happens. The need to control begins to fall away. Not because one has given up, but because one has seen clearly that control was never truly possible. Just as a skilled musician no longer thinks of each note, but becomes one with the music, the seeker begins to move in harmony with existence itself. Actions arise naturally, responses become spontaneous, and life flows without the constant interference of fear and resistance. This is true surrender. It is not defeat, not resignation, not passivity. It is deep intelligence. It is like a leaf carried by the wind, not because it is weak, but because it has no resistance to the movement of life. In this surrender, there is great strength, because there is no longer conflict. The mind is no longer divided between what is and what should be. There is only what is, and a complete openness to it. And in this openness, a profound recognition dawns. The same law that governs the stars governs your breath. The same principle that moves galaxies moves your thoughts. You are not separate from the Dhamma, you are an expression of it. The wave is not separate from the ocean, the flame is not separate from the fire. When this is seen, even for a moment, the sense of isolation begins to dissolve. Then refuge is no longer something you take, it becomes something you live. Every moment becomes an expression of alignment. Walking, breathing, speaking, even silence, everything begins to reflect a quiet harmony with existence. There is no longer a search for meaning, because meaning is found in the direct experience of being. And this is the culmination of the three refuges. The Buddha shows that awakening is possible. The Sangha reminds you that the path is shared. But the Dhamma reveals that truth is already here, always present, always available, waiting only to be seen. When you take refuge in the Dhamma, you are not moving towards something, you are awakening to what has always been. Thus, the three refuges are not separate, they are a single movement of awakening unfolding in three subtle stages. What appears as three is, in truth, one continuous deepening of vision. At first, the seeker stands in darkness and looks outward, searching for something certain, something real. Then a single point of clarity appears, the guiding star. It draws the eyes upward, it gives direction, it awakens trust. This is the refuge in the Buddha, the recognition that awakening is not imagination, but a living possibility. Without this first glimpse, the journey would never begin. As the eyes adjust to the night, something else begins to reveal itself. The sky that once seemed empty is now filled with countless points of light. You begin to notice that you are not alone in this vastness. There are others, some brighter, some faint, some near, some distant, but all part of the same silent movement across the sky. This is the refuge in the Sangha, the understanding that awakening is not an isolated event, but a shared unfolding. Just as birds migrating across the sky do not need to speak to one another to remain aligned, the Sangha moves through a quiet, unseen harmony. Their presence strengthens your own direction. Then, a deeper shift occurs. The attention that once moved from one star to another begins to expand. You no longer look only at the lights, you begin to sense the vastness in which they appear. The sky itself, boundless and unmoving, becomes visible. And in that moment, a profound realization dawns. It was never the stars alone that guided you. It was the vast space that held them all. This is the refuge in the Dhamma, the recognition that truth is not contained in forms, but is the very ground of all forms. It is not something you move toward. It is what you have always been moving within. What began as seeking now begins to dissolve into seeing. In the beginning there was effort, the effort to understand, to practice, to progress. Each step felt like movement towards something distant. But as clarity deepens, effort gives way to ease. Not because the path disappears, but because the sense of distance disappears. It is like searching for your own reflection in water. At first you disturb the surface, trying to grasp it. But when the movement stops, the reflection appears naturally. In stillness, what was being sought becomes self-evident. The journey too begins to transform. It no longer feels like a path with a destination, but like a deepening into what is already here. Just as a person digging a well does not create water, but uncovers what was always beneath the ground, the seeker does not create truth, but reveals it. The layers of confusion, fear, and grasping are slowly set aside, and what remains is simple, direct, and unchanging. The journey was never about reaching, it was about uncovering. And in this uncovering, even the sense of being a seeker begins to fade. The one who is searching, striving, comparing, and becoming slowly dissolves. There is no dramatic ending, no final event, only a quiet shift. Like a wave realizing it is not separate from the ocean, the identity that once felt solid becomes transparent. What remains is not a person who has arrived, but an awareness that was never absent. In this awareness, stillness is not something achieved, it is something recognized. It is not the absence of movement, but the absence of inner conflict. Life continues, thoughts arise, actions unfold, moments pass. But beneath it all, there is a silence that is untouched. This stillness is not separate from activity, it is the space in which all activity appears. It is like the depth of the ocean that remains calm even when the surface is restless. So the three refuges, when lived deeply, are not steps to be completed, but a continuous unfolding to be realized. From the star to the constellation to the vast sky, from the teacher to the community to the truth itself. And in the end, nothing new is gained. Rather, something false falls away. The search ends not because something has been found, but because the one who is searching has come to rest. And in that rest, there is a quiet, luminous simplicity. No striving, no becoming, no reaching, only this moment, exactly as it is, held within the boundless presence of Dhamma. This is the stillness at the heart of the journey. This is the refuge that was always here. So when these words arise within you again, Buddham saranam gacchami, Dhammam saranam gacchami, Sangham saranam gacchami, let them not remain sounds. Let them become your way of living. In moments of confusion, remember the star. In moments of loneliness, remember the constellation. In moments of resistance, remember the vast sky. You are not separate from this path. You are the path unfolding itself.